Morning folks, I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School. First of all, I want to apologize about my lack of videos over the past week. I have been teaching back-to-back classes now for several weeks, as well as trying to finish up my third book that will release sometime in probably late July or early August. And I have back-to-back classes as well as a trip to Sweden coming up very shortly, so I'm going to be stretched a little thin over the next few months. But the class that we have coming up this weekend is the Pathfinder Scout, which is an intermediate level class. It's the second intermediate level. The first class is the Pioneer, and it's more of a fixed camp type scenario. We talk more about building things to improve your camp, a little bit about self-mapping and that type of navigation, as well as camp cooking. And now we're going to move into the second level of that intermediate class, which is the Scout. And it's more about away from a permanent base camp, more of a moving camp, and more about map reading type navigation, UTM and grid coordinate type plotting on an actual map itself, terrain feature association type navigation, as well as more natural woodsman type navigation that I can't get into right here on this video because it's a lengthy discussion that we do within the Scout class. But I'm packing up for that class because it is an away class. We go out and we camp in the wilderness area and we stay out there during this entire class. So what I thought I'd do today is, in the spirit of my buddy Sean Kelly's Junk on the Bunk, I thought I would do a junk on the bunk type video from the wall tent and show you that, okay, I'm taking things from the wall tent to pack up into a pack of things that I'm going to take on a short scout, hunt, or gathering trip. So that's what I thought I'd do today. If you stay with me, I'm going to break this stuff out. I've got a Swedish engineering pack and a haversack are my main two carry items, and then what I have packed inside those. And it weighs in at about 35 pounds. All I have in this tent is a 25-pound scale, an old brass 25-pound scale. And this is what they would use most of the time to check the weight of their pack that they were going to be carrying, because people like Nesmith and Kephart thought that 35 pounds was about the maximum load someone would want to carry over distance for a long period of time. So I'm trying to keep my load right at that 35-pound mark. And it does bury the scale at 25, but you can bounce it very lightly and it bounces the scale. So it's not real far below that 25-pound mark. I'm guessing it to be less than 35 and right around 30. So let's look at what I've decided to carry for a 4-day scout. Okay, main items first real quick. We have the Swedish engineering pack here, made in 1963. Really heavy, bulletproof pack. It's got leather straps and leather harnesses on it. Not going to go anywhere. I've got a small 17-inch H&B hunter's axe here. I'm not going to carry a full-length axe out into the woods away from my base camp. I have a Pathfinder Scorpion as my belt knife. An SAK Swiss Army knife that I'm going to use out there as well. And this has an extra blade, a saw blade, and a couple other tools on it that may come in handy for me while I'm out there. A Kupilka cup that will be attached to my belt with my knife. And then I have a haversack that right now has very little in it. It has a couple horse blanket pins attached to it, a 1-inch roll of duct tape. I have my navigation pouch in here that has my map, my compasses, protractors, and those things in it, as well as some teaching items. And I just have a straight up stainless steel junk water bottle in here with a rubber stopper that I've put in it and a leather cord for it, and then I just put an eye bolt in it. And this is just a beater water bottle, but it's nice and thin, so it fits in my haversack really nice, and that's why I'm carrying that on this trip. And then I've got my bush pot that we'll look at in a minute in my main pack. So these things would be carried on the outside of my body or in my pockets. And now we'll look at the contents of this backpack that make up that 30-35 pounds. Okay, so what I really like about packs like this is they're simple. It doesn't take a whole lot to figure out where your stuff's at, because you really only have two main compartments. One pocket on the outside, main bucket on the inside. I try to keep the things that I'm going to need fast where I can get to them quickly. So this outer pocket has an extra shemagh in it, so I've got some type of a cooling device, a head rag, a hygiene, first aid, all those things right there handy. I have a roll of number 36 bank line and my fire kit, which includes flint and steel, char tin, magnifying glass, and I've got a Bic lighter in there as well for emergencies. but in this class we're going mainly with the flint and steel type fires. I have my folding saw, and then down the bottom I have a rolled up piece of oiled cloth that has 3 pieces of fat wood in it, and that's my emergency fire starting kit. I can always char this if I need to, but it is oiled, and it's got 3 large pieces of fat wood in it and a 6-inch ferro rod, and this would be considered my emergency fire starting if the weather were really, really, really bad. And those items all go in the front of this pack. Okay, I moved the camera position a little bit for you guys so we'd be able to see a little bit better what we're looking at here while we're doing this. I've got this thing stuffed pretty good, but that's the beauty of a pack like this, is it's got a really nice narrow profile and you can stuff it pretty good and full. It's got a drawstring on it here, as well as a laundry type bag opening in the top that's got a closure on it as well. Now, what I generally do is, if I'm going to put a blanket in my pack, I don't really roll it up, I stuff it. But I'll put it into some type of a folded straight like this, where it's been folded over several times, and then I'll start to stuff that in almost like it's a piece of large cordage or a sleeping bag being stuffed into a stuff bag. So that's all right down the middle of that pack, just like that. And this is a queen size 100% merino wool Pathfinder blanket. All right, that's going to be my main sleeping blanket. I have my bush pot in a bush pot bag from Camp Craft Outfitters here. This is an oilcloth bag that keeps everything protected. The advantage of that oilcloth is I can store other things in there. And the first thing I have in here is part of my food, which is just a large slab of salt cured bacon. This is made by my buddy Scotty Kinder. And again, it's just folded up into a piece of cotton material and placed on top of that bush pot in that waterproof bag or that oil canvas bag. Now, let's talk about the bush pot itself. Bush pot is just a normal Pathfinder bush pot. I've got a can of Old Bay garlic and herb seasoning in there. My headlight, again, this is in the top of the pack. Spoon and fork, a tin of cocoa or coffee, a spare candle, and a spare lighter. Those are the contents of that bush pot. But what that does, it allows me to store some of these smaller items in this bush pot so that I know exactly where it's at and it takes up less room in my pack, and all of that goes in this bag, which can be carried separately out of this pack if I need to carry it around camp or to another location a short ways away from where I'm sleeping or whatever. And this bucket on this pack, or excuse me, this bucket type container that we're using for this bush pot also will hold water, and it will hold it very well. So you can actually use that for a spare water container or a water bucket that's made of canvas. And then I put my meat right on the top of that thing, that salt cured bacon. And that's about 2 pounds of bacon, something like that, 1.5 pounds. And that's going to be enough of a meat source for me to sustain me for 4 days, even if I don't find food. I've got a tarp in here, and this is a Duluth Pathfinder tarp. It's a 6 foot by 8 foot with grommets on it. And that will be my cover element to go with my wool blanket. In the bottom of the pack, the very bottom, I have what's called a gum blanket. And this is a rubberized piece of canvas that's 5 by 7. That is basically my ground pad, or that I'll use on top of a browse bed for sleeping on. This will waterproof my camp and keep me from getting wet and keep my gear dry. The last thing I have in this pack is my food bag. And this bag holds several of the new type tins that we carry on our website. This bag was made by Camp Craft Outfitters, and it's waxed as well. But this is all the food that I need other than that meat to last me for that 4 days, and I could probably go more like 5. So I take these tins and I tape them up when I'm done with just electrical tape. This one is potatoes, And these are large tins. You can see how big that is in the palm of my hand. I've got pretty good sized hands. That's like a 4-inch tin that's probably 2.5 inches deep. So I've got 1 tin of potatoes. I have 1 tin of mixed beans. I have 1 tin of rice. 1 tin of biscuit mix, just add water. So this is my bannock, my biscuits, my bread, my ash cakes. I have dehydrated eggs. And the last tin I have is dried vegetables. So I've got vegetables, eggs, rice, bannock or biscuit mix, potatoes and beans, as well as about 1.5 pounds of meat. That is more than enough food to last me for a week if I needed it to. But on a 4-day scout, I'm going to be eating high off the hog, whether I get any meat sources or not. And all of those, again, stuffed straight down into this bag. The sleeve is just exactly the right size to hold these tins, and this is exactly what the old timers did and the old scouts did. Was they had a sleeved bag like this that tins would stack on top of each other, and they would put their food tins in that bag, so they were all in one place. They were all kept neat and tidy, and you could store lots of food in a fairly small area. And all of that goes on one side of that backpack, and there's room in there, if I wanted to put at least 2 more tins. But I feel like what I've got in there is more than enough. So the way I've got it, I can just fold it over and tie it off, and it fits just about right. I could probably put 1 more tin in it, and it still wouldn't be longer than my backpack is deep. You can see, might even be able to put 2 in there if I wanted to. But that's more than enough food. And that is everything that's in this backpack. It's now empty. So really, you're taking up a lot of room in the backpack, but you don't have a lot of items. Other than your tools and things like that that are in the front pocket here, you pretty much got your food, your sheltering system, and your bush pot with things like extra ways to start fire, spare candles, and your headlamp, and then your eating utensils. So it works out really, really well. Okay, so let's talk about packing all this stuff back up. Well, we've got our gum blanket on the very bottom. It sits in the very bottom of this pack. On one side, we've got our food bag, and on the other side, we've got our rolled tarp. We can fold against the back. In between that creates a space in that pack. And in between those 2 rolls is where that blanket stuffs down into. And on the side where your tarp is, it's not as high as your food, that's where your bush pot goes. So I take this blanket that I've got folded up here, and again, I folded it into this configuration, and now I'm just going to stuff it, just like this. And when I get it down in there, I'll get my bush pot and put that on the very top. Push it down in there to compress that tarp. And the blanket goes on the very top, and the excess gets folded over to the opposite side. Just like that. Now that's everything that goes in the main bucket of this pack. So now I can take and strap this dude up. Again, very much like a laundry bag. And just push everything down. Just a couple half inches is enough to hold it. Push it down in there good. Just like that. Then gather these up, pull this together, tie it down. Just like that. And then this flap comes over the top and gets pulled down tight and cinched over everything. First, we've got to pack this pocket right here. So again, in this pocket, we've got our emergency fire tinder, the things we want to get to fast, our folding saw, our main fire kit on one side, very similar to the inside of the pack where we've got one main roll on one side, a roll of cordage on the other. We've got one roll on each side of that main. And we've got our scarf, smog, whatever we've got there, stuffed down over the top of that. And then we close everything up tight. And there's our main pack. Then we have our haversack. That's going to have our water bottle on one side, our nav kit on the other side, just like that. Our belt knife, our Kapilka cup on our belt, SAK in our pocket. And then we have our axe to deal with. Okay, so our axe, we're going to slide it right up underneath this pocket here. We have a tab right here. And we're just going to take that tab and put a loop of leather through it just like that. You know, Lark said. We're just going to come over here like this. We're going to half hitch this dude nice and tight. Right to that thing, just like that. And that's not going to go anywhere. And that's going to connect our pack directly, or our axe directly to our pack. Okay, so here's what the pack looks like when it's on and ready to go. Thought I'd show you guys that. Last thing to throw in is the toothbrush. I'm ready for a trek. Appreciate you guys joining me today for this video. I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, for our business, for all of our sponsors, instructors, affiliates, and friends, and I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thanks, guys.